The coach rumbled along the winding road, bouncing Sarah Williams up and down in her seat. She peered out of the window at the passing landscape, taking in the dense forests and rolling hills. The scenery was beautiful, but it did nothing to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Sarah was on her way to Willow House, a remote Victorian mansion that was to be her new home. She had accepted a position as governess to the young daughter of the wealthy Smith family, and now she was on her way to meet her new employers. As the coach drew closer to its destination, Sarah's nerves intensified. She had never been a governess before, and the thought of living in an isolated mansion in the middle of nowhere filled her with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Finally, the coach pulled up outside Willow House, and Sarah stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The mansion loomed before her, a dark and imposing presence that seemed to blend into the surrounding forests. As Sarah approached the front door, she noticed that it was slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside, calling out a greeting to anyone who might be inside. There was no response, only an eerie silence that made Sarah's skin prickle. She walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floorboards. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-looking men and women, their eyes seeming to follow her as she passed by. Sarah finally reached the parlor, where she found the Smith family waiting for her. Mr. and Mrs. Smith were both tall and imposing, with stern expressions that made Sarah feel small and insignificant. The little girl whom Sarah was to look after was hiding behind her mother's skirts, her eyes wide with curiosity.
"Welcome, Miss Williams,"
said Mrs. Smith, her voice chilly and formal.
"I trust your journey was uneventful?"
"Yes, thank you,"
Sarah replied, trying to sound confident and composed.
"Very well. We shall leave you to settle in,"
said Mr. Smith, gesturing towards the staircase.
"Your room is on the second floor. We shall see you at dinner."
With that, the Smiths turned and left the parlor, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She looked around the room, taking in the antique furniture and the ornate decor. There was a fire burning in the fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Sarah shivered, feeling a sudden chill in the air. As she made her way up the staircase, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. She turned around, but there was no one there. She shrugged it off as her imagination and continued up the stairs. Finally, she reached her room, which was spacious and comfortable, with a large four-poster bed and a window that looked out over the gardens. Sarah unpacked her belongings, trying to ignore the feeling of unease that still lingered in the back of her mind. As the sun began to set, Sarah decided to explore the mansion. She walked down the hallway, listening to the creaking floorboards beneath her feet. She opened the doors to the other rooms, taking in the dust-covered furniture and the faded wallpaper. As she made her way back to her room, Sarah noticed that one of the doors was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, revealing a small room that was filled with a strange, musty smell. It looked as though it hadn't been used in years. Sarah stepped inside, feeling a sudden sense of foreboding. She looked around the room, taking in the old furniture and the cobwebs that hung from the ceiling, and then she saw it, a pair of eyes staring at her from the darkness. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She strained her eyes, trying to make out what she had seen in the darkness. Was it just her imagination, or was there really someone, or something, watching her from the shadows? She took a step forward, her hand trembling as she reached for the light switch. With a flick of her wrist, the room was bathed in a soft yellow light. Sarah gasped as she saw what was in the room with her. It was a doll, a life-size doll with long blonde hair and blue eyes. It was sitting in a rocking chair in the corner of the room, its painted face staring blankly at her. For a moment, Sarah felt silly for being so frightened. It was just a doll after all. But as she looked at it more closely, she realized that there was something off about it. Its eyes seemed to follow her as she moved around the room, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive. Sarah shuddered and turned to leave the room, but as she reached for the doorknob, she felt a cold breeze brush past her. She turned back to the doll, and her blood froze in her veins. The doll's head had turned to face her, its eyes now fixed on her with a malevolent gaze. Sarah felt a scream building in her throat, but it was cut off as the door slammed shut, trapping her inside the room. Sarah pounded on the door, trying to force it open, but it was no use. She was trapped, alone with the haunted doll. As the night wore on, Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. She could hear strange noises coming from outside the door, scratching and tapping sounds that seemed to be getting closer and closer. She thought of the stories she had heard about Willow House, of the strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena that had been reported over the years. And now she was experiencing it for herself. Finally, just as Sarah thought she couldn't bear it any longer, the door creaked open. She stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. As she made her way back to her room, Sarah knew that she couldn't ignore the strange happenings at Willow House any longer. She had to find out what was going on before it was too late. Sarah woke up early the next morning, her mind still reeling from the events of the previous night. She knew she couldn't stay in the house any longer without figuring out what was going on. She got dressed quickly and headed down to the library, hoping to find some clues in the old books and documents that lined the shelves. As she sifted through the musty tomes, she came across a book that caught her eye. It was an old diary, its leather cover worn and faded with age. Sarah opened the diary and began to read. It belonged to the former owner of Willow House, a woman named Emily. As she read through the pages, Sarah's heart raced with excitement. Emily had recorded all sorts of strange occurrences at the house, from doors opening on their own to ghostly apparitions that roamed the halls at night. But it wasn't just the paranormal activity that intrigued Sarah. Emily's diary also contained a wealth of information about the history of the house. She learned that Willow House had been built in the 1700s by a wealthy merchant named William Willow. He had made his fortune in the slave trade, and many believed that the house was cursed because of the blood money that had been used to build it. Over the years, the house had passed through many hands, each owner adding to its dark history with tales of murder, suicide, and mysterious disappearances. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she read through the diary. It was clear that something evil was at work in the house, and she was determined to get to the bottom of it. She spent the rest of the day poring over old documents and books, piecing together the history of Willow House. As the sun began to set, she finally felt like she had enough information to confront the evil that lurked within its walls. With a newfound sense of purpose, Sarah set out to explore the house once more, armed with the knowledge she had gained. She knew that the evil that haunted Willow House wouldn't give up without a fight, but she was determined to see it through to the end. As Sarah made her way through the dimly lit halls of Willow House, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She knew that the evil that haunted the house was still present, lurking in the shadows and waiting to strike, but she was determined to confront it head-on. As she walked, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of what she might face. She had read about ghostly apparitions, demonic possessions, and all manner of supernatural horrors in her research, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. But she kept moving forward, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to put an end to the evil that plagued the house. As she rounded a corner, Sarah saw a figure in the distance. It was hunched over, its back to her, and it appeared to be muttering to itself in a low, guttural voice. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as she approached the figure. She could feel the malevolent energy radiating off it, and she knew that this was the source of the evil that had been tormenting her since she arrived at the house.
Who are you?
Sarah demanded, her voice trembling with fear and anger. The figure slowly turned around, revealing a face twisted with malice and hatred. It was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen before. Its eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and its skin was a sickly shade of grey.
I am the spirit that haunts this house.
The figure growled.
And you are trespassing on my domain.
Sarah stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that she was in danger, but she refused to back down. "I'm not leaving until I put an end to your evil," she said, her voice steady and resolute. The figure let out a deafening roar, and Sarah felt a blast of energy hit her like a wave. She was thrown backwards, her body slamming into the wall with a sickening thud. As Sarah lay on the ground, catching her breath, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The evil that had haunted Willow House was gone, and she had played a crucial role in banishing it for good. But even as she savored her victory, Sarah knew that there was still work to be done. She had to find a way to make sure that the evil never returned. She stood up slowly, feeling the ache in her body from the fight. As she looked around the room, she noticed something that she hadn't seen before. In the corner, hidden behind a pile of debris, was an old book. Sarah cautiously approached the book. Her curiosity piqued. As she picked it up, she realized that it was a journal written by the previous owner of the house, the one who had fallen victim to the evil that had been haunting it. The more Sarah read, the more she began to understand the true nature of the evil. It wasn't a ghost or a demon, as she had originally thought. It was a curse placed upon the house by a vengeful witch centuries ago. The witch had been wronged by the original owners of Willow House, and in her anger she had cursed the house and all who lived in it. The curse had been passed down through generations until it had become the malevolent force that Sarah had just banished. But now that the curse had been lifted, Sarah knew that she had to find a way to break it for good. She pored over the journal, searching for any clues that might help her. As she read, she realized that there was a way to break the curse. The witch had left behind a set of instructions for how to do it. Instructions that had been lost to time. Sarah knew that she had to find those instructions. She packed up her things and left Willow House, determined to uncover the truth. Over the next few weeks, Sarah searched high and low for any information about the witch's curse. She talked to historians, visited libraries, and scoured archives, but she found nothing. Just when Sarah was beginning to lose hope, she received a mysterious message. It was a cryptic note written in an old-fashioned script, and it instructed her to meet the sender at a local antique store. Sarah arrived at the store feeling apprehensive, but as soon as she walked in, she knew that she was in the right place. The store was filled with ancient artifacts and old books, and she could feel the weight of history bearing down on her. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Sarah realized that it was an old woman. The woman beckoned Sarah forward, and she began to speak.
You're searching for the witch's curse, aren't you?
The woman said,
I can help you, but you must be careful. The curse is more powerful than you can imagine.
Sarah listened intently as the woman revealed the secrets of the curse, explaining how it had been created and how it could be broken. It was a complex process involving ancient spells and rituals, but Sarah was determined to see it through. With the woman's help, Sarah began to gather the materials she needed to break the curse. She spent countless hours researching and preparing, determined to see the curse broken once and for all. Finally, the day arrived. Sarah returned to Willow House, carrying with her the tools she needed to break the curse. As she entered the house, she could feel the malevolent energy that had once filled the air begin to dissipate. She made her way to the center of the house, where she began to recite the ancient spells and perform the required rituals. Emma stood there, paralyzed with fear, as the creature stared at her with its glowing red eyes. It was now or never. She took a deep breath and slowly reached into her bag, feeling around until her hand closed around the handle of the antique silver knife. The creature snarled and lunged at her, but Emma was ready. She sidestepped its attack and plunged the knife into its side, causing it to howl in pain. But it wasn't over yet. The creature swiped at her with its claws, and Emma barely managed to dodge in time. She backed away, trying to catch her breath as the creature charged at her again. This time, she was ready for it. She stepped aside and drove the knife into the creature's heart, causing it to let out a final scream before collapsing onto the ground. Emma stood there for a moment, panting and trying to process what had just happened. She had defeated the monster that had haunted her dreams for years. She had finally found closure, but her victory was short-lived. As she turned to leave, she felt a cold breeze on the back of her neck. She slowly turned around to see the creature rising to its feet, its wounds already healing. Emma knew what she had to do. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of gasoline. With trembling hands, she poured it over the creature's body and lit a match, watching as the flames consumed it. As she walked away, she felt a weight lifted off her shoulders. She had faced her fears and emerged victorious. The nightmare was finally over. Emma sat on the porch of the old Victorian house, watching as the sun slowly set on the horizon. It had been several weeks since she had defeated the creature that had haunted her dreams for years, but the memories were still fresh in her mind. She had spent countless nights researching the history of the house, trying to piece together the puzzle of the creature's origin. And in the end, she had found the answer. It had been a curse placed on the house by a vengeful witch who had been wronged by the previous owners. The curse had brought the creature to life, feeding on the fear of its victims. But now, the curse had been broken. Emma had exorcised the spirit and purified the house with a special ritual. She had brought peace to the restless soul and restored balance to the universe. As she sat there, sipping a cup of tea, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had faced her fears and overcome them. She had conquered the darkness and brought light to the world. And now, she was ready for a new chapter in her life. She had found a new purpose, a new meaning, a new passion. She was going to become a paranormal investigator, helping others who were plagued by supernatural forces. As the night fell and the stars came out, Emma smiled to herself, knowing that she had finally found closure. She had defeated the monster